Hi, we're going to get right into this Right Way refresher class, and it's a refresher because a lot of you know a little bit about this system, but some people are brand new, so we're going to start at the very beginning. So at Prime, all of our tractors and trailers are air ride, and what that means is that they're all supported by air springs. Officially they're air springs, a lot of people call them air bags. Doesn't matter to me. The idea is that on a tractor and trailer, and you'll see my artwork behind us, on a tractor and trailer, the systems are separate. So the trailer system is separate. The trailer axles are one set. The tractor axles are another. But it's really simple, and that's what I want to make sure you all understand. All these air springs are tied together with just a 1/4-inch air line, and that goes from one to another. And then all that happens then is the whole weight of the trailer, the weight of the load, is supported by these air springs on the trailer and on the tractor. This is the box. This is a Right Way box. All of these are mounted on the trailer, generally on the frame rail, but sometimes they're mounted on what we call the bogie or the slider of the trailer. And so I'll say this several times, it's a super simple system. It converts basically the air pressure in the air springs to pounds, and that's what's displayed on this gauge. So a brilliant idea here on Right Way's part. They don't have any electronics involved at all. It's just air pressure straight to this gauge. The thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is they think because the system hasn't been calibrated for a long time, or that maybe we've hit some big bumps or something crazy, that it gets out of adjustment, but it really doesn't. Again, it just converts air pressure to weight, and it reads out on this trailer gauge and in the tractors. Behind the dash, we have these smaller 2-inch gauges. So that pretty much tells you how simple this system is. Okay, so I want to talk about this gauge in your tractor again. Remember, this is a 2-inch diameter gauge. Generally, what we do is we take out the air filter restriction gauge because it's not really that important, and this one really is. Remember, I've told you this a couple times, but I want to reiterate. This is connected directly to your air springs, and this only reads from that 1/4-inch air line. It only has a couple of wires so that we can light it up at night so you can see it. But this is super important because you can always check what's on your drive axles. Remember, you can always check how much weight is on your trailer at any time as long as you're on level surface and you have the brakes released. Now that's the other big important thing you need to remember. Always check your weights, level surface. Your truck has to be in neutral. Trailer brakes are not set, your tractor brakes are not set, and your foot is not on the brakes. Remember, your truck is not going to roll away if you're on level ground. It may move a couple of inches, but it's really not going to go anywhere, and that is super important that you follow those directions. Several people have made bad mistakes by thinking they've still got to have their foot on the brake. So the important thing to notice on this gauge in your tractor, and on the trailer for that matter, is it has a little bitty slot here for a small screwdriver. If you're on any of our scales, and remember that Prime in Springfield, Missouri, has 2 scales indoors. In Pittston we have a scale, and in Salt Lake City we have a scale. So you can always go in through those bays and check your weights when you're on the outbound lanes. If the gauge on the wall are giant displays, those are some big LEDs there, if that happens to say, for example, you weigh 33,500 on your drives, then you want to make sure that this arrow says 33,500. And if it doesn't say that, then you can calibrate the gauge yourself. You put a small screwdriver in here and turn the screwdriver until the needle says 33,500. So it's always a good practice to go through our bays and just check to make sure that your scale in the dash is correct. Now let's go back to what I said earlier in this video. There's really no reason why it should ever be out of calibration. Hitting a bump doesn't make any difference. The amount of time that since you've calibrated it doesn't make any difference. Weather doesn't make any difference. All those factors, all out of play. Consider that this really is some great solid information for you to keep. Okay, we're going to get into section number 2, which is how much weight we can put on the truck, basically the steers, the drives, and the trailer axles. So legally, we like to be in the 12,000 to 12,500 pound range on the steers. And one thing that a lot of people forget is that Once we set the weight, or once we set the fifth wheel on the tractor so that we have 12,000 to 12,500 on the steer axle, is you never really need to move it again. It's a set it and forget it. Now, I want to stop for just a second and be sure you all understand that. A lot of people, for whatever reason, don't ever check their steer axle, and they don't force enough weight up on the steer axle. If you run around with only 11,000 pounds on your steer axle, you'll never be able to get to 80,000 pounds gross. You'll only be able to get to 79,000 because you don't fully utilize that steer axle. Okay, so once we fully utilize the steer axle, then the rest is really easy. On the drive axles, we're allowed 34,000 pounds, and on the trailer axles, we're also allowed 34,000 pounds. So that puts us at 80,000 pounds gross. Now, at Prime, we go through some real easy numbers. The biggest portion of this exercise that we're going to talk about is round your numbers, okay? A lot of people try to add all these numbers when they get a CAT scale ticket or when they're adding up all their weights. Generally, what we're going to do, though, is we're going to round, and we're almost going to just really drop off the last three numbers. So in this case, all trucks at Prime weigh a lot or very close to the same weight. And in that theory of rounding, I want to talk to you and tell you that all trucks weigh 20,000 pounds. Now, you may say, well, look, my truck doesn't really weigh, they only weigh 17 or 18,000 pounds, but with fuel in it, drivers, chains, all your gear and food, we're just going to call it 20,000 pounds. And again, as I say, we're going to round, we're just going to make it 20 even. In our cases, and I'm mostly talking about reefer people, but the trailers, we're going to say weigh 15,000. I can tell you, they don't really weigh 15,000. They weigh about 14.3 to 14.8, somewhere in that range, depending on specs. But we're just going to round up and we're going to call it 15,000. Again, we're going to drop those 3 zeros off the back. And so clearly, the total weight is 35,000 pounds. Remember this, that you're legal up to 80,000 pounds. So the number that you want to plug in here, that means every truck in our fleet can haul 45,000 pounds with no problems. Now, this bothers a lot of our drivers for some reason. And remember that our shippers, they pay for us to put the weight on the truck and the trailer. They don't especially want to have you ship out of there with less than 45,000 pounds. We should give them really good measure. It's okay to load 45,000 in any of our trucks and trailers. And I'll just go ahead and tell you this. If you feel like you can't haul 45,000 or if that makes you nervous, call your fleet manager because there's something else going on where we have a bad weight or there's something that we just don't understand about how your truck, the weight is balanced. But again, 45,000 is just great. I want to talk for just a moment about how we set the steer axle to be at 12,000 pounds and then how we adjust the trailer axles in case we're heavy or we're a bit light or we want to talk about bridge laws. So the first thing, and you'll see here in this screenshot, on the tractor, every position that we have on the tractor is about 500 pounds on that fifth wheel slide. So if you happen to be at about 11,800 pounds, as an example, on the steer axles, we really need you to be at least 12, and we'd prefer you to be up to around 12.5. So every notch on that fifth wheel, on our Freightliners at least, is 500 pounds. So slide one notch forward, and you'll always be at 12,300 pounds, or at least in that range, and that'll be just perfect for the tractor. At that point, you just want to set it and forget it, and you really won't need to adjust that anymore. And the times that you come through any Prime terminal, you can always just check to be sure you're in that low 12,000 pound range on your steer axles. Now, concerning the trailer axles, and we slide those quite often. If you need to slide your trailer axles, our trailer tandem or our bogies are set up on 6-inch centers. Every notch that you slide on your trailer axle is about 250 pounds, so it's real easy math. 4 holes equals about 1,000 pounds. And that's whether you want to add weight by moving the trailer axles forward, or if you want to subtract weight from the trailer by moving them rearward. So again, remember, about 250 pounds per hole. One other thing that's really important, and that is there's been some confusion from people on what the California setting is, as an example. And so there's a decal on the side of the trailer, and that decal should say something like this: count hole positions from the front edge of the slider, which means the very front edge of the slider rails, and if it looks like a hole, or it may have been a hole, or it has a plug welded in the hole, count it as a hole. Okay, now that we've gone through a couple of the basics, I want to tell you just things to take away here on from this video. One of the biggest things that I believe that we can help ourselves with is that if we have a load that's 45,000 pounds in the trailer, remember that 45,000 pounds in the trailer will put us very close to 80,000 pounds. Remember when we did that math just a few minutes ago. So 45,000 ought to get us to 80,000. The money here for this video is if you can get 34,000 pounds on your drive axles, and remember that you've got your gauge in the tractor that you check all the time just because you're passing through to make sure it's accurate. But if you can get 34,000 pounds on your drive axles, you can't have any problems on your trailer axle, right? Just mathematically, 34,000 here means everything is going to be great on the trailer axle. It'll also be about 34,000, but no problems. Now, remember this. There's no need to worry about balancing the weight between your tractor and your trailer. Again, just get 34,000 pounds on your drives and you're golden here. First off, the officers at the state inspection scales, they're not the bad guys. They're really good guys. They want to help us out as much as possible. One thing that I would suggest to you is that they're not looking for someone who's 300 or 400 pounds overweight. Officially, I guess that is the rule. We have a handout for APU allowances on drive axles that generally covers us up to 550 pounds over there. So we have that as a resource and we can hand that out to you. But I want to make sure you understand this. Those guys at the scales and those women at the scales, not looking for someone 300 or 400 pounds overweight. They're looking for someone who's going to roll across their scales 3,000 or 4,000 pounds over. And here's what happens. People hop in the truck and they may say, well, look, I've got 45,000 pounds on board and my right way gauge on my drives says I only weigh 32,000 or 31,000, so I'm good. Well, now that's not the case, because you know if you're approaching 45,000, you have to be around 34 on your drives. That's why you really need to be checking the gauge on the trailer. This doesn't mean you need to go to a CAT scale, but just get out and check that gauge. Because again, if you have 45,000 pounds in the trailer, you will need to be around 34,000, real close to it, okay? So keep that in mind. But again, don't worry about a few hundred pounds. Be very careful to check the trailer gauge as well so that you're not 3,000 or 4,000 pounds over and you just don't know it. So I hope that helps. And if you have any questions, the answer here is to always call your fleet manager. Get them on the telephone. They've gone through one of our classes. They know what the weights are, what the allowances are. If they have any questions and they can't get you fixed up, I've told them to conference me in. I'll be glad to talk to the three of you. We'll work through these things and we'll get you fixed up. It's not a case where it's generally a big deal, but in most cases, we're able to figure out how to get the thing moved around so we don't have to go back to our shippers and bother them and having them reload the loads. So again, thanks for your participation. Thanks for watching. I appreciate y'all.